Hello everyone and welcome to the We Love Hitchin Interviews 2024. My name is Matt Porter, founder of the Facebook group We Love Hitchin, which has been a vibrant space for community for the past 9 years with a membership of approaching 30,000 people. We're thrilled again to be hosting today's event at the workshop Hitchin. A massive shout out again to James Jury for stepping up as our host today. The workshop provides hot desks, co-working space and even offices. Visit workshophitchin.com for more information. Over the last couple of weeks, we have been speaking to candidates running for the Hitchin constituency in the upcoming general election. We hope to learn more about their platforms, visions for their community, and plans to address the key issues that matter to us most. Many of the questions asked today will have been drawn from a recent ONS survey of the key things people worry most about. So let's get started. Joining me today is Chris Lucas, representing the Liberal Democrats. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, Matt. Nice to make you acquainted.
Thanks for being here. Let's start by getting to know you a little bit about you.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about your background and what motivated you to run for election in what is a new constituency?
Absolutely. Well, my background's in teaching. I've been a teacher for 10 years. Prior to that, I ran my own business. And prior to that, I worked in industry in marketing and advertising sales. Politics is a bit like teaching in some respects, and that is that it's a bit of a calling. You know, it's not something that you kind of sort of think that you want to do for your entire life. You kind of realise that, hey, you know, I genuinely care about this and I want to make a difference. And so I remember hearing about in roughly about 2010. I heard maybe a bit earlier. I heard Charles Kennedy talk about the Iraq War, and that's when it really spoke to me, and I realised then that the Liberal Democrats were the tribe that I wanted to be part of. And so I got more involved in that time. I became a councillor when I was living in Rickmansworth in South Hertfordshire.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Bath, worked alongside the Liberal Democrat MP for Bath, who was then Don Foster. And I felt that, you know, this is something that I really want to do. I came to Hitchin in 2018. And got a job as a lecturer at North Herts College and also at the University of Hertfordshire, teaching business and law. And I've been there ever since. I live in the centre of town on Brand Street. My children go to Hitchin Boys School. And so I am embedded into this community, and I also represent the community now as a councillor. I was elected first in 2022 and then re-elected this year on May the 2nd. As the district council alongside Councillor Keith Hoskins for Priory Ward. So, yeah.
Excellent.
That's me.
Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So let's now dive into some key issues that are facing our community and the country in general.
Sure.
So the first question relates to, not surprising, the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Many families in Hitchin are still struggling with the rising costs of living. Food prices seem to be rising at alarming rates, whilst we are being told inflation is now under control. What new measures would you propose to help alleviate these financial pressures?
Well, I too am in suffering like everybody else as a result of cost of living crisis. House prices are going through the roof. Inflation, okay, the news today was welcome, but it's still relatively, compared to not that long ago, considerably high. And as a teacher and anyone else who has working in the public sector, wages have not increased in line with inflation. So we're all feeling the pinch. I myself had the call just last week that my fixed term mortgage is going to change, which caused a consternation of no end, thinking, okay, how am I going to make ends meet? So I'm no different than anybody else. So the Liberal Democrats are sensitive to that. And the Liberal Democrats think that those with the broader shoulders should carry the most weight. And we're looking at measures such as windfall tax on the power companies and the social media businesses and the banks, those who are most able to, you know, give a little bit more to help alleviate the pressures on everybody else. You know, we are very keen on having a fair deal for everybody, not just the exclusive few or the vested interests of the few. We're also keen to look at capital gains tax and using that mechanism to try and bring in more money into the exchequer so that it will take the pressure off those who are struggling right now.
Yeah, which brings me on to like a follow-up, which is how would that be funded without increasing the burden on taxpayers?
Yeah. Well, along with those windfall taxes, I think we cannot get away from looking to grow the economy, which means that we have to look at our trading relationship with our nearest and dearest partners. And so the Liberal Democrats are very, very keen on mending the fractured relationship with the European Union and starting with trying to have access to the single market, working closely with our European partners to try and generate prosperity for all across the whole of the continent of Europe.
I mean, I understand. What I understand, the view is to try and rejoin Europe, but that would have to be for a referendum. Are you looking just to repair the ties that have been broken by the whole process?
Absolutely. Let's be clear about this. Nobody is calling for rejoin now. There's no appetite for that in the country. We're still suffering as a country as a result of that highly divisive and, in my opinion, factually incorrect referendum, in the sense that we were all asked about a straightforward yes or no question: should we remain part of the European Union? But it was much more nuanced than that. Your version of what Brexit means and my version of what Brexit means may be entirely different. Did it mean that we had to leave the customs union? Did it mean that we had to leave the single currency? Did it mean that regulatory alignment across the board, we'd have to do our own thing? Or our versions of Brexit are very, very different and very, very personal. So to be presented with a binary answer, a question of the way that we were given, I think has led to this schism in society and has caused untold damage to the economy. So we must seek to repair that, and that we need to start in repairing that by fostering much closer relations again, try to rebuild the trust. The thing about Brexit was that it was the breakdown in trust between the UK and the European partners. It meant that we were more adversarial than collegiate, and that trust is still have not been repaired. There might have been, better relationships, because there had to be, between ministers in the EU, and the European Commission, but actually it was never going to be the same as it was when we were members of the European Union. So
I think that some of the countries actually in Europe who remain in Europe took it quite personally as well. The people in those countries as well. So it's a lot to
and I think that what to me, it's not necessarily the actual result. I mean, it was so close, right? So to have a result, have a referendum that was so close and left with a zero-sum answer, we now leave. I don't think that was right. But also, for me, it's the signal, it's the optics. What does it mean? Okay, the great United Kingdom has taken itself away from the European Union, our nearest and dearest neighbours, and actually that signals a kind of we don't want to be associated with you anymore, and that's not very nice, is it? That doesn't present well to your
I went to a talk with an expert on economy at Cranfield College, and he spoke quite plainly about Brexit and said his words were, "We had the best deal out of any of the members there, and even if we went back, we would never get that deal." That same deal. That was gone.
Well, if you look at just think about the impact that it's had on the pound. The pound has suffered against the euro by up to 20% since Brexit. So that in itself speaks volumes about the damage it's caused to the economy. And I think that, yes, it's all well and good. The easy answer is to kind of tinker around the edges with tax and have some sort of sleight of hand. We didn't say we wouldn't raise that tax. We were going to raise this tax. I think we're all wise to that effect. everyone's looking at a growth strategy, and we all want to have better productivity and have more people producing more goods and all the rest of it. That's absolutely fine and essential. But let's not lose track of the fact that we've got this market of 400 million people on our doorstep, and we're putting up barriers to trade. And that makes no sense. So, as I said, I teach business and law at North Hertfordshire College, and one of the things that really, really upsets my students is when and I always try and play both sides, as you know, trying to help them to kind of develop their own critical thinking skills. And they just look at me with astonishment and bewilderment and say, you took us out of this market. You're teaching us about economics. You're teaching us about trading and sales and international markets and international relationships. And yet you're trying to make the academic case for Brexit, and you're failing, sir, miserably.
Yeah.
So, and I can't say further than that, really.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you. We'll move on to question 2 then,
yeah, sure.
Which is NHS and healthcare. Yeah. With 85% of the people in that poll concerned about the NHS, what are the plans to improve healthcare services, reduce waiting times, and address staffing issues?
Yeah. It wasn't that long ago when I had to try and get a GP appointment myself. And funny enough, we are just down the road from my GP surgery. And if I told you that I picked up the phone at 7:59 a.m. and then literally I look at my phone and then pressed dial as soon as it 8 a.m., only to be told I was 29th in the queue. And I'm sure that my experience was no different from the vast majority of people in Hitchin. We are blessed with some fantastic doctors and very, very, very professional and they want to do a good job. However, clearly, the demand is outstripping supply. So the key thing that we need to look at is increasing the total number of GP doctors across the country. And the experience in Hitchin is no different. It's been replicated throughout their constituency. I know that in areas such as Arlesey and Stotfold, it is particularly acute.
Yeah, I live in Stotfold.
Yeah. So there you go. So you know as well as, probably better than I do.
I have to tell you that our family, due to our personal circumstances, as we have children with who are vulnerable,
right.
We chose to move surgeries to Letchworth, which is out of catchment, and we had to sign a form to say that we agreed we wouldn't have home visits and those things. Not that I'd had a home visit for a long time.
Gosh, I was about to say that's rare.
And that worked very well. However, my son was signed up with beds CAMS and other organisations who immediately dropped him from their books, and he then had to have a reapplication through Hearts CAMS, who then said, we've got a long waiting list, we'll try and get to you when we can. So just that moving 3 miles has in fact caused him loss of care, again. So that's the kind of issue, and it's to do with funding. Literally, that was all it was, because there wasn't supposedly an agreement in place between our surgery and mid-beds.
Listen, I've heard, obviously not your story, but I've heard similar stories as a counsellor. Just people just saying that where is the funding, where is the money, particularly for things like special educational needs. And I know we're going to talk about that later.
That's later,
and mental health challenges.
Yes,
it is one of those areas which people don't like to talk about, really, but it's becoming much more prevalent in everyday life, and I think it was exacerbated by the pandemic. Now, I was thinking more about my students and how the pandemic really, really has impacted an entire generation of young people. I think that the consequences of the pandemic are not going to be felt for a very long time. I don't think it's any. I don't think it's any secret that there's been an increase in mental health issues. There's been a lot more awareness around anxiety and around depression. And there's a lot more students who are presenting with certain social skills that are building blocks of social skills that are missing. That as a result of the pandemic, of those couple of years where we were under lockdown and other procedures. So the effect that had on the NHS, particularly on social services, was immense, and we are still feeling the aftermath of that now. So the Liberal Democrats, we want to have an immediate injection of 8,000 new GPs across the country. That's something that we want to be very, very focused on and increase healthcare provision across the board. And okay, I know we're going to talk about SEN later on, but we want to have a key focus on those key issues because I think that it's such an important area that is currently. I don't think that any party, any sort of provision or policy or manifesto pledge really has focused on those issues as the Liberal Democrats have.
Thank you very much. I think that's good. I think we're clear on that one. I'll move on. Otherwise, we will be here all night, and I'm sure neither of us want that. So, question 3, economy.
Yeah.
The broader economic situation is a concern to 68% of the population. What strategies do you have to address inflation? This inflation's obviously coming down, but the cost of everything remains the same.
Absolutely.
Regardless. I think that so that's important. Unemployment and employment and encouraging people to work, and in the economic stability. Sorry, is that?
No, that's absolutely fine. So, I'm a public sector worker myself. I work as a teacher, a lecturer at North Hertfordshire College in Hitchin. So, it's particularly acute in the FE sector, in the further education sector, because this government have stripped out funding out of the FE sector, unlike any other sector of education. So, myself and my colleagues, we feel it. We feel the inflationary pressure of everything going up in terms of food, in terms of fuel, house prices, services, you know it. We all know it, and yet our wages are stagnating, have stagnated. I'm not saying that it's better, particularly better in the private sector, because I'm sure that we're all feeling the pinch, but there's a lot more leverage within the private sector to take into account increases in salaries. If they can pass on those costs on to their customers, then obviously they're being able to then increase salaries commensurately. We don't get that as teachers, and we don't. So we feel that pressure, acutely at the coalface. So in answer to your question, what we're going to do about it, then it goes back to I think it was the first question where we talked about we need to look at things like we can tax around capital gains tax. So we're looking at those millionaires and billionaires who could maybe give back to the exchequer, the country, a bit more. It's perhaps they don't need to be earning the millions and billions of pounds that they do without contributing to the country that's allowed them to earn that. So let's look at that. And we also need to look at the windfall taxes. We need to look at the role that the banks and the tech companies have, who have, let's face it, they have really, really, as a result of operating in our country, they have reaped billions of pounds from ordinary people, and I think it's timely that they get a lot more of that back to take the pressure off. That's just the normal everyday person in the street. Because it goes back to what we're saying about the Liberal Democrats believe in having a fair deal for everybody in our country.
Thank you very much. And there was a follow-up, which was what differentiates yourself, but I think you've kind of explained that as part of the answer, so I won't go over that. Okay. Let's go on to question 4, which is climate change and the environment. 61% of people have a growing awareness and concern about climate change. What measures do you propose to promote environmental stability in Hitchin?
Right, okay. So Hitchin is no different from anywhere else, because we all live on this planet. And this planet, we only have one planet, okay, and that's planet Earth. And our impact that we're having on this planet is we need to think about the legacy that we're leaving behind for those who come after us. And as a teacher who's stock in trade, is dealing with young people, and I need to try to educate them about what it is that my generation is doing or is leaving behind for theirs. And when I think about the impact that we have on things like our rivers, our chalk streams, and our seas, and I think about the impact that this government is allowing water companies to release raw sewage into the waterworks, and at the same time allow the fat cat investors, the directors of these businesses, to pay themselves a bonus and hand out dividends to their investors on the back of it. That makes zero sense to me. And so one of the things that we want to do is that we want to have an Ofwat, the Office for Water Regulation. We want to regulate it with teeth. We want to replace the Ofwat, because clearly they're not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
All right. So we want to replace Ofwat and have a regulator with teeth who can actually genuinely find the companies where it hit them, where it hurts, really, and make sure that those fines actually do have an impact to help prevent those releases. We also want to do something kind of. We want to encourage the ordinary people to play their part, and those of us who are lucky enough to go abroad, many of us may have seen when we go to France and Spain and places like that. There are solar panels on public buildings and in car parks. Why can't we do that? Yeah, I mean, I understand that some people don't necessarily feel warm about having solar farms crop up in the local area, and I totally understand that. And local people have a right to be able to protest about that sort of thing. But on public buildings or on car parks, yeah, why is it that the Europeans seem to be able to manage it without any problems, but we seem to struggle with it? Now, it all comes down to money, and I totally understand that, but that's where the investment needs to go in to help us meet our climate change targets. And I also think that there ought to be something more that we can do as the everyday people. I don't know if you've ever looked at getting solar panels on where you live, or if you're able to do that, but they're expensive. They really are. You have to have quite a lot of money to make the initial capital investment. And the irony is that the money that you invest, it's those people who are relatively rich who reap the benefit of cheaper bills. So that if you can't afford it, you pay more. That doesn't make any sense to me. So what we need is a solar panel rooftop revolution, where it's the government that offers free installation, that offers incentives, real cash incentives to ordinary people, so that they can benefit from solar panels on rooftops. So I genuinely think that we need to make it a lot more accessible to everyday people to play their part.
Yes. So, question 5, crime. 59% of people are concerned about crime. It's a major concern for many people. What are your plans to improve personal safety and the effectiveness of law enforcement in our community?
Right. Something that's very dear to my heart, Matt, and I can tell you why, and that is because at last count, I have had 6 bicycles stolen from since I've been here in Hitchin. One from the college and 5 others from my home on Brown Street. So it is something that I know a lot of people feel very strongly about. It was interesting when I was sitting in an area forum recently, and I was hearing reports from the crime prevention officers, they're actually saying that crime in Hitchin and the surrounding environments is actually going down, and that actually when you take out a few kind of wrong-uns, bad people, you take them out, they have a massive impact on the figures. The trouble is, I think that that you take those out, and invariably you'll find that others recognise that there's a gap in the market that can be filled. And I think that's where certainly things like bike crime and thefts have from stores and from shops, which I know is also a massive concern to our traders, is on the rise. And my fear is, and I'm not saying that the figures are wrong, but my fear is that actually a lot of that goes unreported. A lot of that is just a shrug of the shoulders and going, well, what are you going to do about it? I spend an awful lot of time reporting this and doing a report here and a report there, but what actually is going to be done about it?
And maybe larger stores, maybe it just goes down to shrinkage.
Or wastage.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So, answer to the question, we need far more visible bobbies on the beat. It might sound somewhat of a cliche, but we need to invest in community policing. It really makes a difference when you see police actually patrolling, not in their cars, not driving around trying to nab somebody who's gone through, an amber light or something like that. I mean, that's important as it is, but I'm talking about just wandering the streets, getting to know people, getting to know their local community, the traders, the individual households by name, and so I think that would make so much of a difference. But also, not only do you get to see the traders and individual community people, but you also get to see and know the wrong-uns. Yeah, and then when you can cast your eye and look around and scan for, what's so-and-so doing? I remember I nicked him last week for something or the other. I think that makes a hell of a difference. So, and that's what the Liberal Democrats really believe. We believe in community policing, and we believe that it needs to be much more in investment in having a much higher presence. And I think that there will be a corresponding improvement in the feeling of vulnerability to crime.
And faith in the police.
Absolutely. I like I say, I don't doubt for a minute that the figures that were reported or everything going swimmingly in our local area, I don't doubt those figures for one moment. But you need to delve a little bit about underneath those figures. How much those figures don't reflect what goes unreported, firstly, and secondly, I think that those figures. There's a saying that perception is reality. Yeah. Never mind. You could have a conservative minister trapping off about how things have massively improved and inflation's gone down, whatever, and that all those IFS statistics might be true. But how does it actually make you feel? How does that trickle down to you personally? And I think that's part of the issue. So if you had a higher police presence on the streets, who are community-minded, who are not in any way adversarial with their,
of course, yeah,
looking with big show of force, but the ones who are genuinely keen to make a difference in their local community and be visible doing it, I think that will make a huge amount of difference.
We have within our Facebook group, we have people reporting crime all the time, and there's obviously the two different sides to it. Some of the name and shame kind of side, which we don't allow, because it's going to cause a problem further on down the road.
Absolutely.
But there's also other ones that we have been contacted by the local neighbourhood police and said, look, we saw that there was an issue and we see that it's been taken down now, or comments have been removed, but would that person like to contact us in order to try and resolve the situation? And in a couple of times that's happened.
I think my bike was
relatively successful.
My bike was on We Love Hitchin. Yeah, my neighbour put it on there, so I myself have availed myself of that particular
certainly
service.
and that brings a bit of faith, because otherwise you get people, police won't do anything, but of course they will do what they can, and in this case they have. So Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it is good, and you know, in my role as a counsellor, I've got to meet a lot of the community policing guys, and they are wonderful people, and they do care. They genuinely do care. Um, it is, however, one must think really: is it, you know, what's really going to happen as a result of this? Is it really going to? If me giving my time to report this, yeah, there's a trade-off in all this, and so, but I think that if there were many more, a lot more bobbies on the beat who are really visible presence, who are who are known community figures and are proud to be embedded in the community, that to me, I think, will have a trickle-down effect on not just the actual numbers, the hard numbers between around crime rates, but also in the perception that people are feeling much safer in their own homes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll move on to question 6, which is housing.
Okay.
58%. So housing affordability and availability are significant issues.
Yeah.
What measures would you take to address the housing crisis, particularly for younger people and those on lower income? I know, having done some research myself, that the price of the average price of a house in Hitchin itself is 20,000, 30,000 more than the outside villages and towns. What was it? 200,000 difference between Hitchin and Ipswich, where I used to live. So that's a lot of money for people to find from their first home. My first home I was able to get at the age of 23. I understand it's late 30s, but sometimes in the 40s before people are getting to the point they can afford a home. So what would you do to try and address this crisis, or what the Lib Dems will do to address the crisis?
I was listening to the radio today and I heard this statistic. I don't know how true it is, but it was on the BBC, so it must be true. A chap on there was saying that the multiplier that a private rental company wanted in order to rent them the property was 33 times their monthly salary. So what they get per month, they wanted a 33 times multiplier. And it's just mind-boggling. How is somebody who's perhaps just come out of university, who's looking for an entry-level job, but doesn't want to live at home? You know, imagine you've gone away from university, perhaps you spent 3 years either in halls of residence or student digs, and after those 3 years, you go, what? You've had all that independence and you lived your life for 3 years, you've grown up, and you've become much more adult and independent, and then after that, you're just left with the prospect of, I can't afford to live anywhere, I've got to go home. And what about those whose perhaps their home circumstances aren't conducive to them going back to their homes? So I'm very, very aware as a teacher, and I teach in a FE college, so I prepare students, my students who are going to university or getting apprenticeships or getting jobs. So this topic comes up a hell of a lot. It really does. And it all comes back down to supply. You know, the demand is there, and that's the issue with Hitchin. You know, I don't know if I could be able to afford where I live now. I was fortunate enough to move here 8 years ago, get myself a mortgage, find myself a property that was suitable for myself and my sons. But I don't know. I can tell you for a fact, my wages haven't gone up to match in line with house prices. Yeah. Absolutely no chance. And so it does beg the question. We are victims, Hitchin, are victims of their own success. Someone said to me the other day that Google employees in their handbook, when they're moving offices, Hitchin was one of the recommended places where they live. Yeah, and because
it's certainly a popular place. You only have to look at programs such as Location.
Absolutely.
And I grew up in Hitchin, and I see them walking around streets that I'm amazed. because they're transformed
Yeah.
from what
They
when I
used to
grew
be,
up, where they
yeah.
might have been I don't know. It's just an amazing transformation of the town, really.
Not only the transformation of the town and the money that has clearly flowed into the town, but it's also we benefited from really good schools, really good schools. And despite, yes, there's been difficulties getting GP appointments, and we haven't even got on to dentists. I don't know if that's coming up later. But public services and crime rates and education are all really, really high. The crime rates are high, really low, but the quality of our public services is really good. And then you add onto the fact that you can get a fast and relatively reliable train service from Hitchin into King's Cross in 35 minutes. The secret is out. So if you want to find a wonderful place within easy reach of London, within the commuter belt,
yes,
there's this great place called Hitchin. That is just within easy reach of the big state, and so the answer is supply. The Liberal Democrats believe that we really need to have a house building program with 380,000 houses per year built for the duration of this Parliament, but we also need to have a proportion of those dedicated to affordable housing, and of those 150,000 a year should be in affordable housing. Now, of course, that's UK wide, and that's a lowest level. That's the base level. So we would be looking to encourage certainly local councils. We want to give them an investment to go on a house building, make a house building program, identify the areas that could take on board these additional housing, but. I'm a councillor in Priory Ward, and I'm well aware of actually, the ward as a whole is, yes, we have pockets of deprivation, but it's a fairly affluent ward, and there ain't that many places around where we can suddenly put a load of social housing. There's not, or affordable housing.
Yes,
there's not. So there's no magic wand to be waved here, but you've got to make a start somewhere, and having some kind of minimum number that you're going to shoot for every year, I think, is a start.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, personally, I've experienced where I moved back to the area looking for a home to buy, renting, and then being stuck in rent for 4 years and spending £50,000 in rent. That was the deposit to my house.
That's crackers. Absolutely
being spent. So the price of private renting and all of those sort of things are real. If you can't afford a home to buy with a mortgage, you're spending as much renting a home.
Probably more.
Or more. Yeah.
So I moved, as I said, from Rickmansworth.
Yes.
And again, in the south of the county. Again, a very prosperous commuter belt area. I was very privileged to live there for a number of years. To then go to Bath, and again, it's another very...
you know where to live.
I know, yeah. It's all work has taken me these places. And then again, back in 2018, I was privileged enough to move to Hitchin. And I've seen house prices just go through the roof, absolutely astronomical. So, and I don't think nobody's got silver bullet to this problem, but you have to start somewhere. And I just in the past, I think we've sort of exported our people on lower incomes, modest incomes. We've exported them to areas, like you said, slightly on the conurbations of Hitchin, on the outskirts of Hitchin, because it's £20,000, £30,000 cheaper. And the supply is a lot higher in those areas. And possibly
the building is more prevalent on those areas.
Yeah, precisely. But I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. you said you were born and raised in Hitchin before
yeah.
you moved off possibly to university or whatever. The fact is that why should you, who was born and raised here, not feel some kind of entitlement to be able to live back in the town where you grew up? So I think that's fair and reasonable. So we just have to make sure that the government is funding the house building program to provide for affordable and social housing for those people who actually come from the area.
Okay. Right, I will move on to question 7, which is roads. What will you do to improve the appalling state of our roads, where in particular potholes that are a hazard to drivers and pedestrians indeed? They cause damage to cars, people trip over, and they're not being repaired timely due to arguments over who's responsible, whether it's an adopted road, unadopted, on a whatever. What plans would the Lib Dems have to try and sort this problem out?
And it is particularly acute in Hitchin and throughout the constituency. Anyone who travels around the constituency, which I have had the privilege to do as the parliamentary candidate for the Hitchin constituency, knows that the road network is in a parlour state, and that's the reality of it. It seems no sooner does a road get repaired before trucks and lorries and other vehicles are constantly going over it, digs them up, and it looks almost as if it's not been done before. And it beggars belief that other countries who have the same, if not worse, in terms of climate, seems to have roads that seem to be much more fit for purpose than ours do. And
they don't fall apart.
They don't fall apart within short order. Now, I'm a keen cyclist, and most people would have seen me around town on my bike. And I know for a fact that quite often I'm zigzagging and slaloming around on the roads, which is dangerous. I'm not unaware of the fact that if I swerve to avoid a pothole, it could create problems with other drivers. I'm aware of that, but I'm also aware that some of these potholes are deep enough to cause me to come off the bike if I'm not careful. So, what to do? The arguments, and it's interesting that you mentioned whose arguments about which authority is responsible for. As I'm sure you and your service users know, that roads are the responsibility of the county council, and the Conservative-run Herts County Council have, I genuinely believe, have been derelict in their duty in getting roads repaired in a timely manner. Now, of course, they're going to say that it all comes down to funding from central government, and they wouldn't be wrong about that, because central government have been starving local councils, county councils, unitary councils, and district and borough councils of funds for a very, very long time. So you need to start funding, having a dedicated pot of money earmarked for potholes or road repairs. And the Liberal Democrats have identified fully costed, fully funded £380 million reserved, dedicated ring fence for potholes to fix 1.2 million potholes each year.
Good. Excellent. And so how quickly would that be enacted?
Well, obviously...
How long would people have to wait before these kind of things started filtering through?
Matt, in my wildest dreams, I would love it to be a Liberal Democrat government come July the 5th. The bottom line is that that expectations may be slightly unrealistic.
But you may have an influence.
But we may have an influence. And so if we do have an influence, then that would mean that we would look to exert our influence from day dot, really, from the outset.
Yeah,
it's one of those. It's a top priority for us, transport and road usage. And so, if I were privileged enough to be elected, it will be something that I will be taken to Parliament from the very first time that I'm in at the House of Commons.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'll move on to community questions, which Thank you very much to our community. I do look at the camera and say thank you very much to the community, and a couple of times people have turned around expecting people from the community to be standing there, but they're not. They're behind the camera. But thank you very much for your questions. The first one is Andrea, a member of the community, has asked, how would you vote if there was a motion raised in Parliament to bring water companies back into the public sector and stop taking profits from an essential source or resource that comes from the sky?
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about this earlier on, didn't we? How it is an outrage, frankly. It is scandalous that the water companies are able to release raw sewage into our rivers and our chalk streams and our seas, and at the same time take money out of the business in the forms of bonuses and dividends to their shareholders. That is disgrace. That is an outrage that the government has legislated, not only allowed it, but has legislated to provide the provision for them to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So what, like I said, what we desperately need is a regulator with teeth, and we also need to ensure that the water companies are part of there's a mechanism where we don't have it bring it back into full public ownership, but there are public organisations that can actually have oversight over the water companies that will allow for the public to have their say in how their water companies is run. And that's why I strongly believe that with that level of that change in that legislation that stops the outrage that comes from bonuses and dividends being.
I think that during discussions, I think figures such as 65 billion would be the cost to bring the water companies back into the public ownership, which is clearly far too much money to be spending at the moment. At this juncture, but I agree with you. Calling them to account properly, held them to account, 100%. I think is more likely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Caroline has asked a question, which I've already spoken to you about briefly earlier, which was she is a WASPy, which is a female who feels that they weren't given sufficient. They were born in the 50s and they weren't given sufficient notice about the changes in the retirement age, state pension age, and therefore she is in financial difficulties due to it. That the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman has ruled the Department of Work and Pensions has failed to adequately inform women born in the 50s to change their state pension age. They are still waiting, many without even reasonable incomes, and are left in many cases to humiliate themselves at job centres whilst decision makers sit on their hands, deciding if they are deemed appropriate for assistance. What steps would you take to help people like Caroline? It's a sort of two-pronged thing here. One is the way that people are treated, and secondly, how quickly they may well get this resolved, which has been dragging on.
The WASPy women have been, I think, the most dignified, the most one of the most strongest groups that have worked to identify what is actually a public scandal. It's along the same lines as the post office scandal, and also the scandal that has affected the Windrush generation. So these are people who have done no wrong, and the government have put obstacles in their way every step of the way. Now, it's a disgrace, it's an outrage, and these things have got to change. We need a change of government that is genuinely sensitive to the WASPy women and the other major campaigns that are affecting our country. This whole stance of unaccountability, not me gov style of governance, I think it has got to change. You need people who are actually going to take responsibility. Own up to when people have been harmed and been wronged, and act immediately with expediency to sort this out.
Yeah.
Now, this government has put up blockages and obstacles every step of the way, and as I said, that there are other campaigns that have suffered as a consequence of this government's belligerence. It's got to stop. And that's why we definitely need a change in government with people who genuinely care. They're not looking to hide behind who said what and who said when and not pay the necessary compensation. They need to be compensated, and they need to be compensated now.
Okay, thank you for that. Nyland and Lauren have asked similar questions. Should we be providing arms and assistance in the Gaza war? And should we be recognising Palestine as an independent state?
I'll take the last question first. Yes, we should. I think that Palestine should be an independent state alongside a safe and secure and independent Israel. So the shorthand is the two-state solution, as they say. But absolutely, it should be an independent state. That doesn't necessarily mean that it should be set up in order to make Israel feel threatened, and that don't have the right to exist, which is unfortunately the stated aims of a lot of those terrorist groups that currently are prolific in Palestine. Obviously, you've got the Hamas, and you've got the PLO, and then in Lebanon you've got the Hezbollah. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you can set it up and Israel is constantly feeling threatened by the nearest neighbor. That's not what this is about. The two-state solution provides for the means that both states can have the right to be free and govern themselves. With regards to the first question about selling arms,
should we be providing us? I know that we don't technically provide arms, but we provide the licenses to the arms dealers or the weapons dealers.
Yeah, absolutely, which is very different from other countries who directly, like the United States, for example, who directly provide arms to Israel. But we do have a licensing agreement, and we allow our companies to sell weapons to not just Israel, but to other regimes around the world who have not necessarily the best record when it comes to using them properly. And I think that the licenses, I'm not saying that we shouldn't sell arms, or we shouldn't provide those licenses, but it's how we govern the licenses. What conditions do we place on those licenses? Yeah, we provide conditions on when we and rightly give support and help to Ukraine about how the weapons are to be used in Ukraine. We should be doing the same again when we sell weapons to regimes around the world.
Yeah,
they should be spent on defense rather than offense, rather than attack.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, but on Gaza, I don't know if there's a follow up on Gaza.
No, there isn't. But if you'd like to.
Yeah, of course. I feel very strongly that the October the 7th, what Hamas did on October the 7th was an atrocity, was disgusting, and was an outrage. And so those hostages need to be released, and they need to be released now. But equally, there is widespread death of tens of thousands of people have been slaughtered across Gaza by the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, and quite often that those people are innocent. Now, I despair. There's one term that brings to me almost a tear to my eye, and that is collateral damage. If you've got one Hamas person that you know is there, surrounded by innocent people, are you entitled to drop a bomb to kill that one Hamas terrorist when there's innocent people all around them? And the short answer to that for me is a straightforward no. We have the means if it means that we wipe out any number of innocent people, even one innocent person, just to get that Hamas terrorist, it's almost like it's okay as long as that innocent person isn't related to you or isn't one of your loved ones.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is right. So there's two things that I would say regarding the situation in Gaza. Number one, the hostages need to be released and need to be released now, but equally there has to be a ceasefire. No more dropping of bombs whilst the diplomatic efforts are being sought to try and resolve this problem.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll move on to the next question, which is from Vanessa and Nicola, who have both asked similar questions, so I've merged them. They've said, and this is close to my heart, of children with special needs, but currently children with special needs are being failed. There is not enough provision or indeed the funding necessary to ensure SEND families get the support they need, not only in education, such as lack of space or appropriate pupil to carer ratios, but also in social care and the availability of agency staff or even respite for parents who are exhausted and alone and in many cases completely. What can you pledge today that will provide some degree of support and hope for those in many cases are desperate families and carers of the most vulnerable in our society, people whose voice, people without a voice of their own, who rely on their representatives in Parliament to speak for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said to you before, not only am I a teacher, but I'm also a parent. So I'm very, very sensitive to special educational needs, particularly in places like colleges. Obviously, it's throughout the whole education system, but it's something that I know very well as a college lecturer. And I see how due to a wanton reduction in the fees that are paid within the education sector, particularly within the FE sector, how SEN provision is so under-resourced, underserved. It honestly breaks my heart when I teach my students who are in desperate need of help and assistance.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm a trained lecturer, but I'm not a trained SEN professional. And that's what every school needs. They need a special educational needs professional in every school.
Yeah.
And every college and every university, a department who are able to cope with the needs of the increasing number of students who are presenting with special educational needs. And for me, the key thing is diagnosis. And that's the hardest thing. Forgive me, I don't know your own personal circumstances, but having spoken to my own residents and having spoken to the parents of some of my students who recognize that their son or daughter perhaps has some learning difficulty or special education needs, but they've gone through the entire education system without having the means to have it diagnosed.
Listen, when I went to school many years ago, these sort of things didn't exist. You literally had a class, remedial class, where children who special needs, learning difficulties, behavioural issues, all lumped together into one. And that sorted out. I think that what we have now is astronomically better than what we ever did.
I agree.
But I know from experience that unless you are incredibly assertive, which I think I might be, you cannot get these things done quickly unless you're assertive. And unfortunately, a lot of children with special needs may well, in some cases, have parents who also have special needs and not the confidence to be able to ask those questions of those professionals and get these things done. So
absolutely.
And the funding of respite care is just terrible, and there's no carers there. Even if the funding does come forward, there's nobody that you can actually pay to do the respite. So there's a lot that needs to be done from a personal point of view with regards to SEN, and I kind of stand alongside Vanessa and Nicola on this, that there really needs to be a a very, very strong. That's not the right
It's
word.
focus.
Yeah,
There needs to be a strong, dedicated focus on this.
yeah,
As I mentioned earlier on before, the fact that we've just come through a pandemic where currently anyone who is in any form of education has suffered massively as a result of those 2 years of COVID restrictions. Having to, I don't know, did you ever try any home learning with any of the young ones?
It was our home learning was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Because we had a child who literally was taken out of a placement where he had normality, and suddenly he was at home and everything's thrown up in the air. So he had terrible problems. My daughter, it was very difficult to get her to focus, and there were remote learning. They were quite young at the time, but it's still, I do see that quite a lot of people probably would be diagnosed with a form of PTSD based on the fact of what happened over that period, from young people to throughout all ages, really. It was an incredible jolt to everybody. And you see children that have communication issues where they don't want to make a telephone call, least of all a face-to-face conversation, where it has to be 3 steps back because their anxiety is so high just having a conversation. So
if you think your experience was replicated across the country, but you ask any teacher whether or not they enjoyed home teaching during the pandemic, we were thrust into this situation. We didn't have any training.
No.
We didn't even have any IT training. We were sent off with our laptops and off you go and teach it from home. So, and then obviously as a parent who was trying to do his home teaching at the same time to his own children, it was an absolute nightmare. And I don't think that the consequences of that have gone away. We are still suffering, whether your child was in year 1 or whether your child was at university, whatever. We are still seeing the consequences of that, and the government haven't recognised that. I think of my classroom, and I can guarantee that there are people with undiagnosed dyslexia, undiagnosed dyspraxia, ADD, ADHD, who have some kind of behavioural issues or learning difficulties that have gone completely through the entire education system, and then they present, and then what are we supposed to do? What training do we have? We're not special educational needs
and of course their education's been damaged, or even in some cases, if they've gone through the entire system undiagnosed, it could well be wasted to some extent. So excellent. Right, I'll move very swiftly on to our final part of our discussion, which is where you have the opportunity to address our audience and explain to them why they should choose to vote for you on the 4th of July. And that's the camera there.
Okay. The country is broken. This government have presided over a drop in living standards. Nothing seems to be working. There are so many problems that we have, that we're all facing, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's the NHS, or whether it's the environment. On the 4th of July, the people within the Hitchin constituency have the opportunity to pick the party that they, or the person that they want to represent them. When I knock on doors throughout the constituency, I hear the same thing. I'm not voting Tory, but I really can't bring myself to vote for Labour. So tell me, why should I vote for you? And the answer is simple. I'm just like you. I'm a person who has raising their families, raising their kids, using the public services. I don't have any vested interest that I need to answer to. My job is simply that I want to provide a fair deal for people across the constituency. And that's what you'll get if you vote for me on July the 4th. I'm If you vote for me as your Liberal Democrat candidate, you're voting for a community champion, someone that will speak up for everybody across the constituency, not the vested interests of a few. So I would encourage you, please, if you give me the honour and the privilege of being a representative on July the 4th, I will work tirelessly every single day on behalf of the community that I love and I love to serve.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris,
You're welcome.
for joining us today,
You're welcome,
sharing
Matt.
your
Enjoyed
insights. We appreciate your time and your commitment to addressing the concerns of the Hitchin residents. To our viewers, which I'm getting blinded now, we've been sitting here a little while. To our viewers, this is the last of the planned interviews. I hope you found them useful and information and good information and a way of gaining greater insight into the candidates' plans for the future should they be successfully elected. Also, to our members and viewers, remember your engagement and questions are vital to this process. Please continue to share your thoughts and comments on this post in the Facebook group We Love Hitchin, and remember to keep comments and discussions respectful and courteous. Once again, a massive thank you to James here at the Workshop Hitchin for providing a fabulous venue. Please do visit workshophitchin.com to find out more. I'd also like to thank the infinitely patient Amanda at the Block Hitchin for hosting our interviews in their fabulous space, and her colleagues who were also extremely helpful, so thank you to them. Also, thank you to Felix for giving up his time and Farley's Salon for his interviews and his support running the Facebook group. Big shout out to my best mate, 50 years, Paul Shallan, who has also provided help setting up and extremely welcome advice on the positioning of cameras and lighting. Finally, thank you to the admins of We Love Hitchin Facebook group who stepped up at no notice 9 years ago and still provide day-to-day assistance running the group. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again soon.